We have details. Meanwhile, the finance minister has announced or disclosed that coronavirus will cost the Ghanaian economy 9.5 billion Ghana cedis in the 2020 fiscal year.
Mr. Speaker, the corresponding projected shortfall in annual budget funding amount ABFA is 3,526 million cedis, while shortfalls in the Ghana Stabilization Fund and the Ghana Heritage Fund are 1,058 million cedis and 453 million cedis respectively.
We have that coming up here on Top Story, brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success, our passion. Gassim, the nation builder, and Vodafone. The future is exciting. Ready? And the minority in Parliament has tonight served notice it will oppose any attempt by government to use the Heritage Fund, which is a part of oil money reserved for future generations, to cushion the economy against impacts of the COVID-19 virus. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has disclosed to Parliament the coronavirus spread will cost the Ghanaian economy 9.5 billion Ghana cedis in the 2020 fiscal year. He, however, says a 1 billion Ghana cedi COVID-19 alleviation program, which will be laid before Parliament for approval tomorrow, and $100 million inflows into the economy from international agencies and stabilization fund will help cushion the economy.
Mr. Speaker, the corresponding projected shortfall in annual budget funding amount ABFA is 3,526 million cedis, while shortfalls in the Ghana Stabilization Fund and the Ghana Heritage Fund are 1,058 million cedis. We in Ghana are still in the quiet before the potential storm, but the rate at which that spread over the last week alone should leave no one in doubt that the drastic measures must be taken now. Our actions in the coming hours and days will determine how we weather the storm, how many Ghanaian lives we can save, and how far we are willing to go as leaders to ease the social and economic impact of this devastating virus on the innocent people of our beloved country. We are being called upon as leaders to act and to fight together on behalf of the people and for the people. We have a collective responsibility to act now to stem what could so easily become a catastrophe as both the supply and demand ends of businesses struggle. We may not know the full health and economic consequences of this pandemic. We may not know when the world will get over it. We may not know when a vaccine may be found. But what we do know is that when we take steps to protect our people and their livelihoods within the constraint of our physical space, we must do it. Together, and with the help of the Almighty, we shall beat this virus. Mr. Speaker, I'll come back to this House with the necessary request for approval for measures to support the CAP.
Now, parliamentary correspondent Joseph Opoku-Gakpo sat through proceedings today. He joins us on the line. Joseph, let's now talk about the specific negative impacts that will hit the economy as a result of the COVID-19 as put out by the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta.
He put out a number of details. For example, with the agri sector, he said the picture is grim. He says it's foresee a situation where the general shortage in food supply would become a big issue if the pandemic intensifies, and that could lead to food inflation and food prices, including rice, bread, poultry, and meat products going up. He further disclosed that with the growth of the GDP, there's been the projection that this year it will grow by 6.8%. They are cutting that down to 2.6% with the outbreak happening. And he says with the partial lockdown, they are projecting that from 6.8% growth in the GDP, it's coming to 1.5%. And he went on to further warn that expected growth could even get worse or slimmer if there is a full lockdown. He said that there will be shortfall in revenue from oil, more than 5.6 billion cedis. He disclosed that we would see a situation where returns that are coming in from taxes, non-oil taxes, more than 1.4 billion, and in general about 2.2 billion Ghana cedis when you combine both oil and non-oil taxes. And he says this is something that is not very good for the economy.
The corresponding projected shortfall in annual budget funding amount, ABFA, is 3,526 million cedis, while shortfalls in the Ghana Stabilization Fund and the Ghana Heritage Fund are 1,058 million cedis and 453 million cedis respectively. Projected shortfalls in transfers to GMPC will be 642 million Ghana cedis. Shortfalls in tax revenue. Mr. Speaker, the anticipated decline in import volumes and values, as well as the slowdown in economic activities, will lead to shortfalls in both import duties and other tax revenues. Based on the performance of import duties to date, as well as assumptions on projected decline in import volumes and values, preliminary analysis shows that import duties will fall short of target by 808 million Ghana cedis for the 2020 fiscal year. Similarly, the projected slowdown in non-oil GDP as a result of the coronavirus pandemic is expected to result in shortfalls in tax revenues, excluding oil tax revenue and import duties, amounting to 1,446 million Ghana cedis, bringing the total estimated shortfall in non-oil tax revenue to 2,254 million Ghana cedis.
So Joseph is still with us on the line. We know how much it's going to cost us as a nation. That's 9.5 billion Ghana cedis. But did the minister say what will be done to alleviate the situation?
So the fund flowing from oil, the stabilization fund, which is usually used to cushion the economy in times of difficulty, he says they are going to review how much they can get out of it, from 300 million to 100 million in terms of how much will be taken down. And in doing that, they will get more than 1 billion transferred from there in order to help cushion the economy. He said that they are arranging with the Bank of Ghana to defer interest payments on non-market instruments, also more than 1 billion from now until 2022 and beyond. He says they are securing money from the World Bank to the tune of 1.7 billion, and then they are as well getting some money from the IMF, more than 300 million. And additionally, they are reducing their own expenditures when it comes to government by more than 1.2 billion Ghana cedis. And additionally, he says they will be looking at the Heritage Fund, which is all money that are supposed to sit down for generations, as a place that they will draw on more resources in order to cushion the economy.
Mr. Speaker, we therefore wish to seek approval from this August House for the Finance Minister to use the funds which will be available in the contingency fund to fund the coronavirus alleviation program. B, arrange with Bank of Ghana to defer interest payments on non-marketable instruments estimated at 1.2 billion Ghana cedis to 2022 and beyond. Adjust expenditures on goods and services and CapEx downwards by 1.248 billion. Secure the World Bank DPO of 1.716 million Ghana cedis. Secure the IMF credit facility of Ghana cedis 3.145 billion. Reduce the proportion of net carried and participating interest due GMPC from 30% to 15%. Amend the PRMA to allow a withdrawal from the Ghana Heritage Fund to undertake emergency expenditures in periods of national emergency. We would like Parliament to consider it in its own time.
You heard the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta there mentioning that among the sources of funding for money to cushion the economy will be the Heritage Fund. You heard earlier my colleague Joseph Opoku-Gapo. Thank you very much. But the NDC MP on Finance Committee, John Jinapo, says the minority will oppose the use of the Heritage Fund to finance the alleviation measures. He is asking the President to reduce the size of government to rather raise more money.
In this difficult moment, in this hard moment, when ordinary Ghanaians are sacrificing, like the minister said, when hotels, businesses are laying off workers in order to to ensure that they cover their costs. This is the time for His Excellency President Akufo-Addo to reduce the size of the bloated ministers that we have in this country. Mr. Speaker, His Excellency President Akufo-Addo must demonstrate leadership. He must demonstrate commitment. He must send a signal to the people of Ghana that he is indeed in charge and he is prepared to sacrifice. Mr. Speaker, we cannot ask the ordinary Ghanaian to tighten their belts when we do not even have belt holes in our belts, Mr. Speaker. That is what is happening today. You cannot have a ministry that has 4 ministers in a particular ministry. Mr. Speaker, you cannot have a system with all those bloated presidential staffers feeding on the pets of government. Mr. Speaker, the minister says that he wants to review the Petroleum Revenue Management Act and eat into the Heritage Fund. Mr. Speaker, I, as a member of Parliament for the Yape Kusogo constituency, support any decision to cut the stabilization fund. This side of the House would help the minister, would help government to go through this challenge. But Mr. Speaker, as for the Heritage Fund, any attempt to eat into the Heritage Fund, we shall resist it vehemently and we shall resist it appropriately.
So that's John Jinapo. He's a member of the Finance Committee of Parliament. His chairman, the chairman of the Finance Committee, Dr. Marcus Ibeyeboa, says there's no better time to use the Heritage Fund than now.
Mr. Speaker, what is even more worrying is that a recovery will be slow and long. It could take 2 years for our economy to recover. Mr. Speaker, to return to pre-coronavirus growth levels means we have to make hard choices. We have to make hard choices. Mr. Speaker, I recall the General Secretary of the NDC saying in 2012 that we have to chop the Heritage Fund. His word. Mr. Speaker, if there is any such time where we have to dip our hands into the Heritage Fund, it is now. Mr. Speaker, it would be absurd for Ghanaians to die whilst we hold 591 million in the Heritage Fund. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to be a member of Parliament at the time when the House decided not to touch the Heritage Fund and Ghanaians died. This is the time for us to dip our hands into the Heritage Fund.
That's the chairman of the Finance Committee of Parliament. Interesting debate on the floor of Parliament. Shortly, we'll speak to Professor Godfred Bokping to get an independent view on the interventions put in place by government to cushion the economy in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then also you heard the chairman of the Finance Committee raising issues that it will be absurd for anyone to say that the Heritage Fund should not be used to cushion the economy in the times that we are in. Meanwhile, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has been allaying the fears of the minority. Now, he's been speaking to Joseph Opoku-Gakpo that they will only use the Heritage Fund as a last resort.
I guess the question that one asks is when do you make a decision to use any resource? Is it when, even if everybody is dying, would you still keep it? I guess that's, and that's real, and I think it's for the House to debate it.
Everybody dying now, and that's the argument.
No, I'm not saying that. I think you and you also see everything that is happening, and then you ask yourself whether you can deploy fast enough. This request is not included in our measures. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's really a question to Parliament.
So it's only when it gets critical, that's when you fall on the head.
It's saying that there are certain laws, and maybe when these events happen, it's when you begin to look whether, you cut yourself off of it or not.
So to make it clear, immediately, the Heritage Fund is not on the table.
It's not included in my measures. It's just me recognizing the laws and saying maybe Parliament needs to relook at what it is. Because we are seeing almost an
apocalyptic event. And
But 575 million.
well, the question really, when you don't have something in appropriation and an emergency event occurs, and President says that you should look for the money, you start looking for the money. So immediately we start finding contingencies like the minister's contingency to be able to appropriate so that work is going on. And then you begin the search for that. And in that instance, we also have been negotiating with the World Bank, looking at the preparedness plan for COVID that they had. And we've been very successful.
Will cutting down on the number of ministers do anything in terms of shoring up the budget any further? As John Jinapo.
No, from fiscal to
the general debate. Will that make any difference at all, as is being suggested by a minority?
I can't help. I don't know. I'll stick to my fiscal. Yeah, as I mentioned, the poverty indexes are quite stark. We have 23.4% of our population, about 7 to 8 million. Receiving under 1,700 CDs a year. Clearly, when you have an event of this magnitude, it calls for finding means of which one can support to make sure that there's life.
So you hear there, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta interacting with some media personnel, including our very own Joseph Opoku-Gakpo, on the floor of Parliament. But let's speak to economist Professor Godfred Bokping. We're grateful for your time here on Top Story. Later on, I'm sure I'll get to take your opinion on the absurdity or not of falling on the Heritage Fund in the times that we're in. But let's deal with the interventions and the understanding of what you got from the finance minister's presentation today. Overall, your impression of government's understanding of the impact on economy considering the global trend.
Thank you very much. Good evening to our cherished listeners. Certainly, these are extraordinary times. These are hard times for a lot of Ghanaians. But I believe that overall, the analysis is quite solid and it's also data-driven, drawing largely from the global economy and then focusing on the Ghanaian economy and then the physical side. We know at the global level, the pandemic is estimated to cost the global economy at least $1 trillion. That is according to the UN Trade and Development Agency. That is quite colossal. When you look at it from Bank of Ghana's perspective, they are estimating that GDP will contract from about 6.8% to about 1.5% in the worst case scenario with partial lockdown. I'm saying this to enable us put within perspective what Ghana government is going through. This is not self-inflicted. This is external, and we have to do whatever that it will take us within our means to be able to contain this situation. So, and then you want to look at it from the physical impact in terms of revenue losses. That I believe that the analysis is quite sound and very honest, and also admitting that a couple of months ago, our projections are no longer that reliable, especially from the oil side, because we're looking at $62, a little above $62. We are talking about something in the range of $20 about now. That has implication for the oil tax revenue, and it has implication for how we will operationalize the annual budget funding amount from the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. So that is obvious now. Beyond that, when you look at the slowdown in economic activity, trade, and all of that, it's certainly going to have implication for your other tax handles. And so all of that have been captured largely, and for which reason we are looking at our total fiscal deficits overall about 30 billion cedis. Because when you look at the plan to contain the virus and then the fiscal losses as a result of the slowdown in economic activity and all of that, we are looking at about close to 10 billion cedis. Then the next stage, for which draws the minority into it, is how do we finance that deficit? And I believe that the minister has made proposals for the consideration of Parliament, which includes the Ghana Stabilization Fund, and then, of course, the Heritage Fund, which I believe is controversial, and then also the government drive to access the IMF Rapid Credit Facility, the World Bank Facility, and then some amendment to Bank of Ghana Act to enable direct financing of the deficit by Bank of Ghana, and then some realignment in government expenditure. So overall, it looks. I gather the impression that the ministry is on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not everything that you'll be able to capture, because again things are unfolding. Again, the reality will begin to also dawn on us as we go into day 2, day 3, day 4 of the partial lockdown, and then how long this virus is going to hang around us. And then when we get over it, it's not like suddenly you can just restart the economy. What we have done, essentially, with the partial lockdown, in fact, you may even call it partial lockdown, because Ghana, essentially, in terms of the institutional unit that drive the GDP, is basically Accra and then Greater Kumasi. So when these two major units are locked down, practically your GDP it's been held back largely. And then also, I also agree with the ministry to the extent that, because when you look at our economy, it's predominantly SME based, and they are more vulnerable in times like this. The kaya is and all of that. So, and then once the flow is truncated, then it has implications. But once all of these things happen, again, it's going to affect government revenue or envelope as well.
So on that revenue note and the shortfall, let's talk about the impact on the ability to deliver on promises targeted to have been delivered by close of 2020.
It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult. Ghanaians should be moderate with our expectations. We have to. I think it's not really the fault of government. It's not self-made from here. So I think that around this time, the easiest thing is to ask for more. But can more be delivered that easily? Certainly not. I mean, when you look at it, it's a bit more scary when you pick it from the global dimension. What is happening in the U.S., what is happening in UK, what is happening in Spain, Italy, and the rest of them. It's a bit scary. My prayer is that we will not be burdening our health systems that much as we have seen elsewhere. And I'm hoping that the good Lord himself would help vulnerable states and vulnerable countries, because the prediction is that Africa will be hit more through this crisis than perhaps the better and well endowed countries. But I'm hoping that we would escape this and escape the war.
Well, thankfully, also, the finance minister outlined a number of interventions that they are hoping to use to alleviate the situation. We've talked about the Ghana Stabilization Fund. They're going to lower the cap, which is currently $300 million to $100 million in accordance with the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. Now, a number of interventions were also outlined apart from this. These interventions, do you see them enough to cushion the economy as it is?
I think that certainly they are not enough. They are not enough in terms of what it will take us on monthly basis to be able to contain this and then maybe minimize the impact to some extent. It is not enough. But the question is, how far can we go as a country without destroying the fundamentals of the economy beyond what the virus would do across the various subsectors? These are the critical issues, because you are also mindful of the fact that you don't overborrow, you don't put the economy on a certain heat path, which will be very difficult to restart, because the recovery would be shorter or longer depending on how we are able to go through this critical stage of the, or let me call it a transition sort of, because whether we like it or not, post COVID-19, things are not going to be the same. Disruptions to production lines and all of that, new businesses would emerge certainly. Some businesses may not come back again. They may not have what it takes to come back again. So there are real consequences that we have to think carefully. If we are saying it's enough or not, I mean, at this stage, certainly we all don't know. In fact, it's not peculiar to us alone. The U.S. did over close to $2 trillion. But the discussion is that it's not enough. we have seen from the monetary side the reduction in interest rates, the reduction in the policy rate by 150 basis points, the moratorium on repayment of principal and other discussions that are ongoing. I believe that, of course, and the call for the other subsectors in the financial value chain to also come in. They are all necessary, though, but at this stage, you just can't do enough.
Okay.
They are overwhelmed. Yeah.
Well, briefly, before I let you off, Professor Godfred Bokpin, the controversy now is whether we should be falling on the Heritage Fund or not. You've heard the minority, we've heard the majority also, and of course, the finance minister says that will be a last resort. The minority feels that it will be absurd for anyone to say that the Heritage Fund should be used to cushion the economy. You have views on that?
It's a tricky call. It's a tricky proposal. Certainly, one will say, I mean, where would the next generation be if the current generation are wiped out? So, and for that reason, somebody can say that, look, let's draw down on that facility to be able to help the current generation, because there's an intricate link between the current generation and the next generation, importantly. But also, I think that is perhaps, I kind of agree with the Minister of Finance that this is the last resort. Let's look at other options. I'm very happy to some extent that the government appointees are pledging almost 50% of their salaries or so to the fund and all of that. I believe that individuals can also join, corporate Ghana equally joining and all of that. Of course, there's also been some call about government looking at its size and all of that. I believe that, of course, since it's not the creation of this government, that may be too much of action or so. But when we talk about the size and the expenditure overall, I believe that let's extend it. Do we need 275 MPs? Maybe now that he has space in Parliament, let's take advantage and make some of the constituencies as well. Let's broaden the discussion. Let's see how we can engineer greater institutional reform anchored within the law, and then begin to, so that when the recovery comes, perhaps it will be a bit faster.
We're grateful. We're grateful for your time, Professor Godfred Bokpin. It's a discussion that I would love to go on and on with you, but we're grateful. We're out of time. Here on Top Story, brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans, your success, our passion. Gasm, the nation builder. Vodafone, the future is exciting. Ready? Time now for Newsnight.